Welcome to BFNC Living, where community, culture, and empowerment come together. I'm your host, Chandra Redfern, and this program is dedicated to keeping you in the know about the stories, initiatives, opportunities, and voices shaping our future. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about life. Welcome to BFNC Living. I am your host, Chandra Redfern, CEO of the Buffalo Federation of Neighborhood Centers. And this is where we talk about things and keep you in the know about what is going on and what could possibly help you in addressing life matters. And so we today will continue our conversation with a caregiver, talking about caregiver stories. Caregivers are a large portion of the unpaid workforce in America, and sometimes we don't realize that, and their stories often go unheard. And so today we have with us Shannon Carter, who is our Director of Special Projects, but also has had experience as it relates to being a caregiver. And so we like to say welcome to Shannon today.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, it's still morning, so good morning. Thank you.
Great. And so to start, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about your journey as a caregiver.
So my journey as a caregiver has multiple facets. And being a caregiver, I am a foster and adoptive mom. And so that had a journey of its own. My nephew currently lives with me. That has a journey of its own. But I think for me, the greatest sense when I think caregiver was the fact that I was afforded the opportunity to assist in taking care of and caring for my mom in her last days. I was extremely blessed to be able to walk out her cancer journey with her. And even down to those last days, we did hospice at home. And for me, I will forever be grateful at the fact that I was able and afforded the opportunity for that.
Right. And so you talked about a couple of things. You talked about the fact that um you are a caregiver to well, they're not children anymore, they're young adults. And then you talked about your caregiving journey with your mom. And it's interesting that you phase it in the way of saying that you were honored and you had the privilege, because a lot of times that is not what people say when they get thrown into caregiver roles. I think we get to that point having been in that situation, but I can tell you, I don't think when I started out in my caregiver role, in any of the times that I've had to be caregiver, did I say like it's an honor and a privilege. I think that for me, I looked at it like, this is what I got to do, and this is what we do, right? It wasn't until I think during the process when I was working through some of my own things, and then after the process, that I was like, wow, that was really an honor and a privilege to be able to do that. Um, but I think, so many people deal with a situation where they may have different relationships with the person they're caring for prior to being a caregiver. I know that was my case with one of my cases of caregiving, that the relationship was very different. Didn't never suspected it would become a caregiving relationship, but it did. And it certainly was a blessing to me to go through that. But when you talk about caring for your mother at her end stages of life, I have two questions for you. And, we like to have just real conversations here because people deal with real life, real emotions. What was your relationship like before you became the caregiver? Because it is different when it's parent child as well, because
Definitely.
our parents are used to taking care of
Excuse me.
us and telling us what to do. And then when you stepped into that role, what surprised you most?
When I stepped into that role, in all honesty, what surprised me most was my mom. And the reason I say that is because I'm being very transparent, very honest and authentic. When I was younger, or, like in my teen years, I kind of felt like, my mom was the baby of five girls. She went out of her father's house into her husband's house. and my mom was used to being taken care of. I was the oldest. And so, to your point about the relationship, that often caused us to clash because um, her ability to want to be taken care of in my younger days made me push back against it.
Mhm.
So, what was so absolutely surprising to me was I had gone through a journey of personal and internal healing that helped my perspective in my mom. My mom and I went through a journey of healing and restoration probably just prior to her becoming sick. So then I was fully ready to take care of her, fully ready to give everything. And then there was this side of her that kind of almost felt like you shouldn't be having to do this for me.
Mm.
And so it was almost like a reversal. And I was shocked because I was like, all this time that you wanted me to do all of this extra stuff and spoil you rotten, and I was fighting it. Now I'm ready to spoil you. Like now I want to give you the world, and everything in her was more concerned about me and more concerned about, are you taking care of yourself? And I felt like the time I wanted and was ready for her to depend on me, now you're trying to become more independent. So it was definitely an adjustment there.
Yeah, and I think, like, you see that a lot, and I think part of it is that the person that is being cared for, especially if it's an adult, they're like they still want to have a sense of say, a sense of control in life, so they were like, "I don't wanna feel like I, need this, like, take care of yourself," and I remember even with my grandmother, she would at the end, she would say, "Well, what can I do for you? Can I help?" She had trouble ambulating and she'd be like, well, if you just set your laundry here, I can help you fold it. And I'm like, no, you don't need to help me fold my laundry,
Mhm.
but I had to recognize for her, there were some things that she still felt like she needed to do to not, I guess, feel like a burden, for lack of a better word. And so that is an interesting dynamic, which leads me into my next question. Um, is, caregivers deal with a lot mentally and emotionally. And um, I don't know, can you share a little bit about how it impacted your mental and emotional health?
It definitely did. Especially emotionally. Excuse me again. I didn't realize often that my emotions were all over the place.
Mm.
And sometimes it took external situations. And so I'll just give a small story. So my dad and I were co-caregivers. And there was one particular day, and when he watches this, he's going to giggle because one day he said to me, "You're tired. You need to go take a nap." We had the hugest, biggest blowout over that one line because at that point I was like, I am not 4 years old. You do not tell me to go take a nap. But I didn't realize. So, like, I was beginning to get snappy with people. I was beginning to get, because I didn't know how to take off the red cape. And
Mm.
so I didn't feel like I was giving my best unless I was super caregiving. And so it took outside people to say to me, you got to step away right now. You need to go rest your brain, rest your body, rest your mind, step away from this. And everything in me was literally scared to step away from my mom because I didn't want to feel like I was slacking in any way, which was then causing me to slack more because now you're making mistakes, you're not doing what you need to do. And so I had to learn for my own mental and emotional health how to sometimes step away and let people help. There were friends and family who said, "You guys don't need to worry about cooking. You guys don't need to worry about, we got this." And we had to learn how to say, okay, thank you, because otherwise we burned ourselves out.
That's a good point you make because oftentimes the people that become the caregivers are the ones that are used to doing everything for everyone. And it can become sometimes, I mean, you can get both situations. One where it becomes incredibly difficult to accept the help and the resources that people are trying to give you, or two, having situations where you feel that you're not supported. And it sounds like in your situation that you had some supports, but was there any time that you ever felt like you were unseen or unsupported?
In all honesty, I'm grateful to say no. I didn't go through that because there was so much support. Um, Again, first of my dad and I did it together. So even if there wasn't other support, like that was one thing he and I, like, we knew we had each other's backs. My mom's sisters would come in and, they would help. And so there was definitely, and there were, people that you always kind of feel like could have stepped up more,
Hmm.
but there was never a time, gratefully, where I did not feel supported because we were surrounded with so much support. Now, that was in that instance. There are other caregiver roles where I'm just like, hello. But in that instance, there was never a time I did not feel supported.
Yeah, and that's good to know. And I think that's a good point because sometimes families deal with caregiving and the thought process is it has to fall all on one person. And it doesn't. Um, the fact of the matter is that, responsibilities can be split. And that's what I did find, at least with my grandmother later on, I found, that I had to ask people like, "Hey, she has a medical appointment. You think you can take her?" It was like a routine appointment. It wasn't anything like, I'm like, I don't need to be there. And quite frankly, I was still working a full-time job and being a mom and a wife and all of that other stuff. And so I was like, do you think you can do that? Or do you think you could, stop by the market, or just like, hey, she wants to go out to eat. Can you take her? And so I did find myself easing up, I would say. Like, I didn't have to be the one to always do it, or just
Mhm.
saying to people like, yeah, she'd love to see you if you want to, stop by and just spend an hour with her, that would be good. And I think it's something that, definitely for caregivers to keep in mind. Um, you know, Caregiving, like you started off saying, you said it was a privilege and an honor, and it definitely can be incredibly rewarding, but it can be incredibly hard too, especially if you are in that sandwich generation, which is really people that are caring for like an older parent or older relative and younger children, which is something that you found yourself in. What were the toughest parts for you?
Um, I think to your point of what you just said, the toughest parts for me was being that middle person or in it sandwiched. So I literally shut down at one point. I shut down everything at my house, and my children and I moved in with my parents so that I could be more dedicated, more committed to that. But it was a struggle for me trying to balance giving everything that I needed to A, help care for my mom, B, support my dad, but then I also still had to be a mom. So again, luckily I had my dad to help in things like, the girls need to be picked up from school, things like that. But as far as there were times where it was a struggle for me because now I got to have the energy to help with homework.
Mm.
I gotta have the energy to just be mommy. Like, now that I look back, I didn't even think about it until now. I don't know if there were any times during that period that I just took some time out and said, "My girls just need 100% of me."
And that's
And
a difficult
so
thing.
yeah, and so it really came down to something was gonna have to suffer, and I literally never thought about that until this very second. During that time in my life, it kind of hurts my heart right now to think of that portion of me that my children lost during that time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it is difficult, in the fact that you have these developing small humans, right? And you have this dedication on the other side, but you have responsibilities and dedication on the flip side of it too. And so that I know that can be particularly tough, and I myself have dealt with that. And you try to figure out a way to reconcile that. And that's why I think the support is really important. I don't think unless you are a caregiver, you really understand. Because especially when you're in that sandwich generation, people may be asking about your parent or the sick, spouse or whatever. But then it's like, yeah, but I got this kid here. I got these kids. And that's a lot too, especially if, I know my daughter is very active. So I'm like trying to, balance her schedule, my schedule, and then someone else's needs and schedule. And I think that's why support is so important. And I think, a lot of caregivers, they just don't have those supports. They don't know where to go or what to do. And I also find sometimes in communities of color, we aren't necessarily forthcoming with the things that we need, right? And that sometimes works against us, and there may be a lot of reasons why we're not forthcoming with it, but it's critical to have supports. And that leads me to say, like, one of the things that we have here is our um caregiver clubhouse program, which is a caregiver program. And what we offer is a few hours of respite for caregivers that are taking care of older adults. But we certainly understand that caregiving is not just dedicated to older adults.
Right.
People are caregiving for spouses. People are caregiving for, children. Sometimes children have disabilities, and that's a whole different conversation. We had a guest that was talking about that. And so there are supports needed, not just, the emotional and mental supports, but also navigating the systems and being with people that get it, right? Because one of the hardest things I found was having the conversation with somebody who had never been a caregiver. And I remember people would, when I would have to make certain decisions, there was questions. Why'd you make that decision? Or I wouldn't do that. Or, and it's like, no, until you actually go through it, you can't say what you will or you won't. And that can be an incredible amount of guilt for a
Absolutely.
caregiver. And so I think, having supports, and that's one of the things that the Caregivers Clubhouse does do, is it allows the opportunity to build natural supports of other people that are going through what it is you're going through. um, get access to those supports for your loved one. That's one of the things I love about BFNC. We have a lot of different services. So, we have the ability to link people to things. But then also there's a little recreation in there for caregivers, right? They do a thing called mystery trips, just a day trip, because sometimes as a caregiver, it's hard to get away.
Yeah.
But one of the things I found out that taking those respite times for yourself is very important. So even if I just, for me, went to get my nails done or just had an ice cream cone. I'll have to go have an ice cream cone. That was just a breather. And so we offer that opportunity for caregivers so they can stay and participate in classes, or they can just be like, hey, I need to know my loved one is someplace for 4 hours, and I'm going to go and do grocery shopping without worry, right? Because it's amazing how those little everyday things become big tasks when you have other responsibilities. And so I'm very, very excited about the fact that we have that program, and we're expanding that program. And I know that that is an initiative that you're working on. We expanded it to include a faith-based component. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I just want to invite anybody that's listening on April the 30th, and I'll be sending out more information for registration. But on April the 30th, we are having an informational session slash focus group because we also want to hear from the community. But I'm super excited because we're now expanding so that our faith-based community has the ability to come in and partner. And let's just be honest. And you said transparency. I consider everything that I do to be attached to my faith. And so I know that there are faith based communities that are looking, that are saying, how can we reach outside of the church to help not only our parishioners, but what are some things that we can do? Maybe we don't have a food pantry, maybe we don't, have all of these other services, but what are some ways that we can reach outside of just our regular Sunday morning services or Bible studies? What are some ways that we can reach outside and help? And so I'm super excited because having caregiving experience myself, I'm super excited to be a part of this because now it we're going to actually give information to our faith-based community how they can partner with BFNC and say you can have your own. So as Ms. Redfern just explained, we have the ability through BFNC. We have programs that help caregivers. Well, now we're offering the opportunity for faith-based partners to come and say, we want to be a part of that. And we want to be an extension of that. And we want to be able to offer services and offer respite services to caregivers and their loved ones. So I'm so absolutely super excited to be a part of this initiative.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I know that we recognize we can't be everything here at BFNC. And so our faith partners have been our partners in a lot of other initiatives that we've had. And so we are looking forward to be able to provide resources, education for them to create their own caregiver hubs, right? And it could be anything. Like I said, sometimes it's just being able to go and have some coffee or tea with people that just get it, right? And you can provide support to each other. Like, I think about how wonderful it would to be able to have that at church for, a Saturday morning or an evening or whatever it works for the church. And if churches have the ability to do a respite, right? I mean, I get it. And the great thing about it is they don't all have to look alike. Like, we are trying to work with communities of faith. And I by default say churches, but it's not just churches. We're looking for mosques and synagogues and all communities of faith, because at some point we all, or many of us, have had to deal with caregiving. And so I'm super super excited. If someone wanted to get information or talk to you about it, Shannon, how might they contact you?
So they can email me scarter@bfnc.org. Also, I'm going to be putting information out and it will have a QR code where they can register or they can even get my general contact information. And so I would love to get an email just so that they can actually send me their church address or their email address so that I can also add them to my information list and so that I can make sure that they are updated and contacted when we have not only new initiatives, but as things are growing with this initiative as well.
Right. Right. Um, and so, you actually talk about your caregiving journey, and it kind of ebbs and it flows because, you said, yes, you had that one journey with your mom, and then, you had the journey with your children. Um, and then you talk about things for yourself. Um, what are some skills or strengths from caregiving that actually have shaped you today?
It has definitely made me more compassionate. I've learned how to look at the bigger picture. I've learned how to see the different perspective. What I did not share, and now we don't have time for me to even go into that full story, I also not full-time caregiving. My godmother is 93 years old. And so I definitely step in and even with her, just trying to help her with certain things. And, as she ages, her memory is not what it used to be. So I have to remember things for her. And so it helps me in my sense of patience
Mm.
and being able to understand. There were things that when we were caring for my mom, one of the things that I learned is, to your point earlier, like I have to let her be as independent as possible, but then be patient. So in her last days, she couldn't hold a glass, but she wanted to hold her own glass to drink her water. And so I had to learn how to put her hand around the glass, and then I do the work to lift the glass up to her mouth so that she could feel like she was holding that glass. That
Mm,
for me was life changing because it's helped me and shaped the way that I deal with people. And now, in understanding, sometimes when I'm dealing with people and I'm looking, going, I used to be like, well, you should know and you should be able to. And in understanding, no, Shannon, there are probably some underlying issues that you don't see. So you got to help them hold the glass.
mm, I like that. And so, if you could leave our listeners with one message about caregiving, what would it be?
It would be understand that the fact that you are strong enough to be able to care for another human being, no matter what it is. The fact that you can care give means that you are stronger than you think, you are stronger than you know, you have more in you than you see. And so, whether it is the universe, whether it is God, whatever bigger life force or faction that you believe in sees enough in you to entrust you with the caregiving of another human being. And that makes you somebody awesome. So you can do it. Even when it's in your deepest, darkest, roughest times, you can do it because you have more strength in you than you know.
Great, great. And my final question as we come down to the end of our time together, what is one thing that you hope for our community?
One thing that I hope for our community is that we would all become caregivers.
Oh,
It may not be caregiving in the sense that we have discussed today, but in the simple fact of just learning how to care for other people in the human race, no matter what color, no matter what religion, no matter what creed, there is something about having a heart that cares that makes you want to help make sure somebody else is good. And
mm,
so I believe the world would be a better place if we would just all learn how to be caregivers.
and that's a wonderful note to end on. Just learn how to all be caregivers. Oh, that's a lot to unpack. Well, listen, I appreciate your taking the time to have the conversation with me on today and being transparent and sharing your story. Um, I know that someone listening is really going to be touched. And again, check out our website, www.bfnc.org, where you can learn more about the BFNC programs, especially our caregiver um, initiatives, which is known as Caring Together, to Shannon's point at the end. Also, you remember to listen to our podcast. We are on every other Wednesday. You can check us out at the WUFO website or where other podcasts are streamed, or at the BFNC website at www.bfnc.org. And so take care for now. And remember, we're here to help you manage life.